the end of everything. The world did not end with a whisper. It did not fade into quiet darkness. It ended in screams, endless, agonizing screams that echoed across burning cities, collapsing mountains, and the oceans turned black with rot. It ended with flesh melting from bone, with shadows that breathed and devoured, with the sky itself splitting open to reveal horrors beyond comprehension. It started as a storm. A colossal, black cloud rolled across the sky, blotting out the sun. The air grew heavy, thick with a rancid stench, a smell of decay, burning flesh, and something ancient, something foul. It crept into the lungs, turning breath into agony. The animals sensed it first. Birds dropped dead from the sky, their feathers rotting before they even hit the ground. Dogs and cats howled and shrieked, clawing at their own eyes before falling limp. Cattle burst open like overripe fruit, spilling black, writhing worms onto the soil. Then came the shadows, monstrous figures that moved unnaturally fast, their elongated limbs stretching into impossible shapes. They had no faces, only gaping voids where eyes should have been, where mouths should have grinned. They crawled, slithered, floated through the streets, their whispers drilling into the minds of those who looked upon them. And they hungered. In the first few hours, entire cities vanished. New York, London, Beijing, all crumbled as the sky split open and rivers of fire poured down, incinerating everything in their path. The streets cracked, belching out black smoke filled with wailing voices, ghostly hands clawing at the living, pulling them screaming into the abyss below. People ran, but there was nowhere to run. Those who fled into the forests found the trees twisting, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers, grabbing, impaling, absorbing them. Faces pressed against the bark, mouths silently screaming. The oceans turned black and thick like tar, and monstrous things with too many teeth and too many arms crawled onto the shores, pulling the survivors into the abyss. The rivers frothed red, and those who drank from them bled from their eyes and ears before twisting into something no longer human. Governments collapsed overnight. World leaders begged for answers, for salvation, but the satellites only showed the sky splitting further, revealing something beyond, a monstrous, writhing mass of limbs, eyes, and chattering teeth. It had been watching. It had always been watching. And now it was here. As the days passed, the few who remained changed. Their bodies twisted, skin sloughing off in sheets, their bones snapping into new horrific shapes. Some became part of the landscape, flesh merging with stone, their eyes blinking from the walls, their mouths whispering unspeakable truths. Others became hunters, their limbs elongated, their fingers splitting into jagged claws, their teeth growing into rows of serrated knives. They no longer spoke, only shrieked and gnashed as they tore through what was left of humanity. The unlucky ones were taken, some dragged into the sky by invisible forces, their bodies distorting in ways that defied all reason. Others melted, their skin bubbling as they screamed, their forms collapsing into writhing, amorphous masses that slithered across the ruins, consuming everything in their path. Some saw the truth too soon. They heard the voices calling from the sky, felt the knowledge pressing into their skulls. They clawed at their own faces, tore out their own tongues to stop the words from spilling forth. But it was too late. The truth was inside them. They whispered it to others and the infection spread. It was not a disease of the flesh but of the mind, of the soul. And once you understood, once you knew the truth of what lurked beyond the veil, you belonged to it. The ground cracked, and from beneath, an ancient voice rose, deep and guttural, speaking in a language no living being should understand. Those who heard it dropped to their knees, their eyes rolling back, their bodies convulsing as they laughed and wept at the knowledge forced into their minds. Time no longer had meaning. The sky churned with colors that had never existed before, shapes that bent and stretched beyond logic. The sun turned black, casting an eerie glow that made shadows dance and shift even when nothing moved. The stars above twisted, forming shapes that should not be, that burned themselves into the minds of those who dared look up. A child sobbed in an alley, clutching a doll that was no longer a doll but a writhing, hissing thing with too many limbs. A mother cradled her baby, unaware that its eyes had turned black, that its mouth was opening too wide, that it was whispering things no infant should know. A man knelt before a pile of corpses, whispering prayers that turned to screams as the dead began to rise, their lips curling into grotesque smiles. And in the distance, something enormous moved. It had no shape, no form, but its presence was undeniable. It swallowed the world as it spread, an endless hunger, a living nightmare. The last survivors saw it, felt it, knew it. And they did not resist. Because this was not the beginning of the end. This was the end itself. And no one was meant to survive. Don't forget to like and subscribe and watch out for the next.